What's up, everybody? My name's Chance, and today we're hopping into the fourth week of the FNM podcast. And this week we're going to be talking about the meta, how we see it, and how M21 has affected it. So, with me today, as always, we have MTG Jeff and HelloGoodGame.
What's up? Name's Jeff. How you guys doing?
Hey everybody, hope you're having a great day.
Alrighty, so the deck that's been prevalent for a while and is most people's go-to because of the decisions you can make and the ramp and all that is obviously Bant Ramp. You have access to the new Planeswalkers, you have access to Yugen and ECD. I want to know, what do y'all think this deck gained from M21, and is it enough to even shift the deck around that much? Because, 3-mana Tef, that's high value. That's not going anywhere. ECD, you're getting a lot of stuff out of it. That's not going anywhere. So what do y'all
Also
feel?
Conquered Death as well, for those who don't know.
That's right. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, Else with Conquer's Death is just a busted card. Honestly, there's just a lot of value in here. And you're just kind of asking like what the main things that came from Course at 21.
Yeah.
So there's a few different options. I mean, first off, Ugin the Spirit Dragon. It's such a good card. I mean, it's cool that it's a reprint. I'm glad that they are reprinting and everything like that. It's kind of interesting to me that they did it in this set and not the Jumpstart where they did a bunch of other reprints. But the biggest thing with Ugin is that it comes down to the battlefield and it either wins you the game or it will really closely win you the game as soon as it comes down. It's 8 mana, so typically 8 mana spells should be doing that. But with this deck, because there's so much ramp with Growth Spiral, Uro, and just so many ways to ramp up, they get to play all the control while still ramping in this deck. It can be coming down turn 6, turn 7 pretty consistently with protection and and Teferi on the battlefield, all this kind of stuff. It's just good. It's a little bit terrifying how good it is. I don't know, yeah. So Ugin is probably the first thing. I've seen a few different decks though running like Teferi Master of Time, the new Teferi as well, Joel Rail as well, which kind of just adds a little bit of extra board presence in the early game, and even just like scavenging ooze to kind of be able to deal with different decks that are out there. Anyway, so there's overall Bant Ramp just has so many value pieces in it that are great. Yeah. So what do you guys think? Is this like the deck? Is there anything that would are there things that really compete with the Bant deck right now? That's my question.
Maybe another ramp deck potentially. You're speaking of new cards that got added. Bant Ramp already had a ton of ramp through Growth Spiral, through Uro. Now we also got Cultivate as well. It's like they keep getting more tools and they do not need any more. Literally everything in their deck and ramp to further their agenda of rolling out a Nissa, which normally is incredibly oppressive. You can't get around that most days. But then she just catapults you further into an Ugin, right? It's very, very oppressive. I think that you have to, even as an aggro deck, to get through it, you got to go quick. And hopefully he's kind of having a misdraw and there's maybe no Boreal Grazers in the deck because that can really slow you down too. It's not always so bad if it's a Growth Spiral in an Uro and there's no field presence and you can kind of build up and get them. And then you're trying to get around their Shatter the Sky. But as far as consistency goes, I think it's all either Bant Ramp or maybe Jund Sacrifice potentially could compete with it just because of such a high damage output that it does have. But as far as consistently winning games, I think just ramping into Ugin is what's up.
So I'm looking now on Aether Hub. Aether Hub has a good snapshot of what is happening, at least on Arena. And on their Team of Reclamation, in the best of 3 format, like on best of 1, it's kind of died out, but best of 3, it is the second most played card deck, kind of tied with Mono Red right now. So it is played, it is out there, and it's a good deck. I think part of it is like Wilderness Reclamation. It does a lot of the same type of things that Bant Ramp typically does as well. It has the whole just win with expansion explosion, but the issue is that this one does really well because it fits a certain slot in the meta. Typically, it has a little bit of a bigger issue against like more the control type of decks that can just counter the expansion explosion, that can just bring out Teferi, and you lose all value of Wilderness Reclamation, not being able to cast anything at instant speed. Just like all those kinds of things. Like, so that's the biggest issue is I feel like Bant Ramp has all of this value where not only does it get to Ugin now, does it have a good early game with Joriel, with Scavenging Ooze. They already had the Ghost Spiral and everything, but now it's just like they're filling out all of these slots that were kind of weaker with extremely powerful cards that are really relevant. And Wilderness Reclamation did get some good stuff, like Teferi, the new Teferi Master of Time is useful with it. But like I just looking at different like deck lists that are out there, like that's like the only new card I'm seeing in those slots. And like, yeah, it can interact, it can still draw cards even through a 3-mana Teferi, but this is where we're really seeing the issue with 3-mana Teferi, is that it shuts down the archetypes that will beat something like Bant Ramp. Like typically when you see something like this where it's a bit more mid-rangey, it has a more value town type of gameplay, you'll start seeing like more like Azorius Control come in, where it's just like straight up, I'm gonna counter all the value that you're going for and outvalue you in the late game because I have a better game plan for that. Like that's typically what you see with that type of semi mid range, semi control type of plan, is that the more control deck will win. And I feel like with Teferi, it's hard for that deck to ever have a shot, because like as soon as Teferi comes down, it's suddenly not a 50% win rate anymore. All of a sudden, they're definitely more heavily favored. And then if it's both players have to ferry out whatever, the value town is still going to win overall. I feel like, and so I don't know. I think that's probably the biggest issue, is that there's just too many things stacked up on that side of the board that make it not worthwhile to be playing something else against it. We're going to see variations come out where it's like which things are better against like the mirror match. So let's say you're seeing everyone else play this exact same version of Bant Ramp. What other kind of stuff can you bring in to be playing against it as well, to maybe have a shot against it?
Dovin's Veto is pretty hot, that's for sure.
Yeah.
All right, shuts down ECD, shuts down Ugin. Quick note on Temur while I'm there mentally. We also got Reign of Revelation. It's just a draw engine, draw 3 cards, then discard a card at instant speed for 4, which is expensive, but with Reclamation, it's all just about cycling. And then you mentioned how it was kind of reliant on the one expansion explosion, right, for a kill command. I do like the addition of Shark Typhoon. It kind of adds another layer to it. You can go wide with tokens, potentially a little Shark Army. But I do agree that the power level is not quite there. Like Bant is sitting at like 10 out of 10, and like maybe Temur Reclamation's like a 7, right?
Yeah. Yeah, which I was really surprised. Like right after the Banhammer came down with Agent of Treachery, with everything like that, Temur Reclamation just shot to the top for the last meta before M21 came out. And I was kind of expecting the same type of thing where it's just going to kind of stay on top. And like it's obviously not a bad deck. It's a good deck. It's going to win you games if you're playing it. But like Bant Ramp still has the Shark Typhoon as well. They got so many extra pieces that just fill in the slots that it makes it really difficult to play against. Honestly, this is part of the reason I've been moving a little bit more towards playing free play rather than playing in the meta right now, because I feel like I'm running up against more different stuff. Like whenever you see decks like this that are just so powerful, that it's hard to beat up against. What do you think about mono red though? Mono red is still a thing always. Does mono red have a shot against the Bant deck, like as a consistent gameplay? We see it played a lot more in best of one. But that's just because best of one typically is the more aggro decks come into play. There's more control type decks tend to lead towards, or people that play those types of decks tend to lean more towards best of 3. Do you think there's like an actual best of 3 mono red deck that can be competing against the Bant Ramp deck?
I think there probably is, but you need like Rakdos Instigated can't gain life, gentlemen. That Planeswalker, potentially, because Uro is just going to annihilate you, gaining 3 life all the time. And then when it hits the field as a 6/6, not attacking through that. The only thing that gets through that is an Annexed Ambercleave. And again, he can just like re-attack, gain 3 life. There's so much life gain in Bant Ramp. It's ridiculous.
When you can't even Ember Cleave because of Teferi, really. You know, like that's the other thing too, is like Teferi shuts off Ember Cleave. That's been one of the biggest issues as well.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, I think Gruul is a much better matchup if you're going to best of 3 for like answering what they're going to be answering with their sideboard, because Mono Red is like, it's so easy to sideboard against because all you're looking to hit is their early stuff / their annex. Like you said, Emperor Cleave gets taken care of by their main board, so it's just, it feels like Mono Red has a rough time even game 1 if you don't get lucky. I think go ahead.
Oh yeah, it's true. Uro is just it's a big powerhouse. You know, the fact that it has so many cards in this deck are not only drawing you cards, like they're doing 2 things at once: draw a card and ramping. You know, getting value for drawing cards and putting out more bodies. Like that's the other issue with the Gruul side of things, is that Jolrael and Scavenging Ooze are on the bottom end, which, you know, again, that's they usually run small enough copies that you can probably get around it. Like I think Gruul is probably a good option. And again, all of this too, like any deck can beat Bant Ramp. You know, like just saying, it's all about the percentages. How often is this going to be beating most decks? You're going to be playing the deck that has the highest percentage to win. And I just think like Bant Ramp has such a high percentage chance to win against most matchups. Gruul, I agree, is going to be up there against it. I think that you can just the fact that they're not going to be running into a fervent champion at the top, you know, late game as a top deck. They're going to be probably hitting a little bit more aggressive, maybe a little bit bigger creatures like Questing Beast, that kind of stuff, where they can go a little bit more aggressive towards it. But that's kind of the same thing that we were seeing with Mono Green coming into a while ago as well. So what about Mono Green? Do you think that has a shot against it?
Actually, I think of all the mono colors right now, Mono Green is the one that's like rocking socks. It's got the Stone Cool Serpent, which is, you know, available to any of the mono colors, but the difference is Mono Green can ramp and make it an actual body, and it has protection from multicolor. It has reach, has all those counters, so it kind of goes well with the Ozolith and the Yorvo that's already offered in Mono Green. I feel like Mono Green's really, really good. It's just, I don't want to say it's too predictable, but it doesn't have the same cycling to where you're like able to look for the exact cards you need, as opposed to the Bant decks where if you're up against Mono Green, you're like, okay, it's Mono Green, I don't need my Teferi probably because it's going to get Questing Beast immediately, you know?
Yeah.
And obviously that's a bit of an exaggeration. You should probably always keep Teferi.
Yeah.
I think Mono Green does really, really good against Bant. We have Scavenging Ooze immediately deals with Uro, right? What else was I looking at? Questing Beast deals with some of their planeswalkers relatively well. They have Gemrazor to take out their ECD or their Shark Typhoons quite nicely. And then it's just like a really fast deck. Stone Cold Serpent dodges Teferi, which is good. And then I think just how aggro Mono Green is right now. Like, say we have a Pelt Collector or probably like a Pelt Collector into a Barkhide Troll into anything, even a Yorvo. That's a lot of damage right away that they're going to have to deal with. And Shadow the Sky costs 4. So if you're on the play and you already have a 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, you're going to be hitting them for quite a bit before they're even able to wipe you. And then you can just follow up with Questing Beasts, right, to try to get that remaining damage. As far as shutting down Bant, I think it's just Scavenging Ooze does a really great job, and Gemrazor primarily. The rest is just aggro, I guess.
Another deck I want to touch on, because I saw Croaky's try to use it to carry him to number 1 today, and you know, if this man's using it to try to climb to number 1, it's got to be a pretty serious contender. Yeah. So Rakdos Sacrifice, we were all a little scared about Gadrick coming out and being like a huge contender in it. Turned out the Mayhem Devil just kept its spot, you know, just chilled out. So, and Liliana Standard Bearer didn't make it in either. So what is it? Why is this Rakdos deck just still such a powerhouse, and it's only seemed to have gained 1 new card, maybe Village Rites, right? Some people were playing Archfiend's Vessel, but that's really the Dreamers, right?
I think, again, it's just the amount of value that's on the text of the cards that are in it. So Priest of Forgotten Gods is just a really, really good card. It has so much text whenever you do sacrifice 2 creatures, and if you're built to sacrifice creatures, then you get rid of the downside and it's all upside, and there's so much upside on that card. Mayhem Devil being able to add to it, all that kind of stuff, and like kind of HEG touched on earlier, is that there's just a lot of damage output that deck can do, like all out of nowhere. And again, it's all very versatile damage. With Mayhem Devil, if you do get onto the battlefield, you're able to send 1 damage at a bunch of different places, which just gives you lots of value where you're trying to go for it. So it's a little bit quicker to the ground than the Bant Ramp deck. It's definitely good. I think part of the reason too, though, like one thing to be looking at, especially as new sets come out, is that people haven't fine-tuned the decks just yet. Like people haven't fine-tuned, where Rakdos Sack has been fine-tuned. It's gone through the ringer for the last set, trying to figure out what's the best way to play it. And they came out with something that's really, really powerful. And so what we're seeing is that playing up against people that are still trying to get used to the new decks, still trying to figure out the exact right plays. And that does come into play quite a bit. Like, I bet you anything, we give it another week, and Rakdos Sack will be, another 5% less of a win rate against Bant Ramp or against other stuff, as it just keeps fine-tuning and keeps getting itself to the right spot. Like, that's the thing I'm worried about, is I feel like that's an issue. One side, though, with Bant, what about combo? Because I feel like combo, in some cases, Bant Ramp doesn't completely interact with it, because Bant, like, it has a lot of really good finishers. It has a lot of good stuff. Like, Ugin can come down and just win the game, but at the same time, like, it is a slow win plan. And so if you give someone enough chance to maybe combo off, like I've been seeing like this Song of Creation mill deck, a couple of things, like decks that can just win on the turn that they're played. They don't have to go at instant speed, so it kind of gets around the Teferi Time Raveler a bit as well. Do you think that there are combo decks that can come out that are legitimate enough, consistent enough to actually play against Bant here?
Yeah.
I think they're just easily sideboarded against, right? Like a couple counter spells, a couple removals on their key pieces. It's just, again, they've got such a consistent main board that their whole sideboard is just utility cards that's specifically meant to shut down the other decks that it's going to struggle with. So, I mean, maybe, obviously, like in a match, you have a chance always of getting there, but as far as percentages go, I don't think it's a bet that I'd be wanting to make.
Yeah, the rough thing for combos is, if you're going for spell combos, like instants and sorceries, they have Dovin's Veto, which is 2 mana. You can't even have a counter war over it, right? It's just done. And then if it's a creature, well, there's Teferi in the main board, so you're just going to have a rough time getting down any combo. And the only combo creatures I can really think of is Veto at 3 mana, so if you're not on the play, and even if you are, again, their Teferi comes down and bounces it. And Terror of the Peaks, which is a 5 mana, so you better be wishful thinking.
Dies to ECD, else will conquers death, dies to whatever.
I really like combos, and I think if you're a combo player and you really love it, just take it into best of 1, because I think, like you said, catching them off guard in the best of 1, or catching them when they have their pants down, that's going to be the best way to get them.
Yeah, I agree. So Rakdos Sacrifice is obviously very, very powerful, but what about Jund Sacrifice, right? To me, I just feel like this variant a little bit stronger. I know that it's not as high in the meta rating, but I just cannot get over these food tokens. They have so much versatility within the game, helping you survive against aggro, more sacrifice targets for Mayhem Devil. Just it can help you survive, so your sustainability goes up, and then it can also increase your damage output. So I don't find too much of a drawback for running green. Like, we have Gilded Goose, Trail of Crumbs, and then like Corvold Fade Curse King. So the amount of green that we do need is very minimal, and I think that the reward that we get from it is substantial enough to make it worth it, personally.
Yeah, I actually like adding the green, because then instead of running the Soul God Lantern, you can run something like Scavenging Ooze, which is a creature, and it can get bigger and it can deal damage, and kind of fills the same slot. You're not getting to exile all their cards at once, but generally they're only going to have 1 or 2 cards that you're looking for anyways. So I think green adds a lot to it. I'm kind of interested, after rotation, if we see some weird Gadrick Jund Sacrifice.
That's what I was kind of thinking. Is that Gadrak, if it goes into any sacrifice deck, it's not so much in the Rakdos version, just because I feel like that's a little bit more low to the ground, everything like that. It would go more into the Jund version where you have the Trilochrums to be producing an extra couple, artifacts, so it can occasionally be attacking in, being able to create a bit more mana with it. The other side though, so I was just checking out another list that went 5-0 recently with Jund Sacrifice, and it's with Bolas' Citadel, 3 copies of Bolas' Citadel. Like if we are talking combo, because again, like I think that is a way that you can win against the Bant Ramp deck, is being able to do a lot on one turn. Like that is issue against them drawing cards, ramping, all that kind of stuff, is that they're probably going to be doing more stuff on each turn than you are. But if you can turn that around, get a Bolas' Citadel or something like that onto the battlefield, which again, yeah, it can be countered, everything like that. But if it's in a deck like this, that's all value anyway, and then that's just an extra piece. If you do stick it, you could just have game over on that turn. And so I think that's maybe something we can look at as well, is like what are some of the other types of decks that are running combos that can go with that. So I really like Bolas' Citadel. I think that is one card that maybe does have a shot against the Bant Ramp deck. We see Azusa also being able to kind of like help make that more consistent. Like there is kind of that whole thing, you can maybe have another combo game plan with all of that going as well.
Yeah, I've actually seen Golgari Titania Roth or Titanix Roth, whatever that card is, that's been actually smacking me around a little bit, and it seems pretty budget friendly. But you're talking about combos. You get this 11/11 with trample down into the battlefield, and it hits very early. So if you're a budget player, I think going for something like that where you're putting either a large body or a large pressure on your opponent up against this Bant Ramp is great. And budget, I feel like, has enough cards in the uncommon and common slots to be there. So it's a little jumbled what I'm saying, but if you're playing budget, I think I agree with Jeff that combo is the best way to take out Bant Ramp for you.
Recently, I've been trying to build my brews with like a pretty well performing base, like we have with the Rakdos Sacrifice, or maybe even say like the Simic Flash, right? And then trying to put a combo or a top end kill command in that's not really reliant on your early game stuff. So we still have 2 options to win our matches. Like we could just play the regular deck, or like we've seen in Jund Sacrifice, just with a simple addition of Bolas Citadel, you can turn a good deck into like an absolute explosive combo deck, right?
One thing absolutely. One thing too. What about cycling? So we haven't really talked about cycling. Cycling was one of those like kind of fringe decks that just is pretty close and powerful. But how is it competitively? Because I've really not actually had that discussion. Like, do you guys think that the cycling deck is actually competitive?
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with HGG. It's just going further down in its effectiveness because people are gaining more and more life. So hitting that Zenith Flare is getting harder. And I think there are good cycling cards. Shark Typhoon is, one of the biggest. I think Zenith Flare is just, I think it was more so flavor of the week. People weren't expecting, hey, I'm going to discard basically half my deck and then find a card that can kill you in one. But now that Scavenging Ooze is out and Soul God Lantern's out and all these, like, it's just too easy to destroy what they rely on for the Zenith Flare, right?
I think it's still a great best of 1 deck if you're a budget player. Cycle your way up to Mythic, baby. But best of 3, there's just so many different ways to deal with a person's graveyard, right? And then nothing that the deck really has is that powerful, other than the chip damage from Drainus Stinger and the Flourishing Fox, because it gets so big, right? But going back, so we're kind of comparing everything to Bant Ramp. This is easily dealable with Bant Ramp. Like they've got Shatter the Skies, just wipes the field, right? They have massive amounts of life gain through Uro and stuff. So ECD is a dead card in that matchup for their main board, so that's nice. But I mean, that's what they're going to sideboard out, pull in their Dovin's Veto, and now your Zenith Flare is absolutely worthless because they're just going to hold on to it, right? So
that's a really good point.
One thing I haven't been seeing past the Gem Razor, like what you mentioned earlier, HGG, is Mutate. Like, feels like it just fell off the earth after this set released.
I love Mutate. I'm still playing it all the time. I don't care what anybody says. Change my mind.
I was going to say, Jeff had mentioned in one of the past podcasts, like, he was excited to mutate down Ugin. And I was like, oh, man, I didn't even think about that. People are going to be running Sterix and just like, oh, free Ugins. But I haven't actually played against any, like, mutate ramp Ugin decks, and I kind of feel bummed about it.
I've run up against it so much. So I'm on the other side of that. I feel like everyone there is like this Simic ramp, Simic Ugin plan where, so yeah, with Auspicious Strix, if you get down a Royal Grazer into Migratory Greathorn into Strix with a Castle Garenbrig, you have a turn 3 potential Ugin. You have turn 3, get two permanents off the top of the library onto the battlefield. And going on that same game plan, you can still get to Ugin fairly quick and just do a bunch of busted stuff with Auspicious Strix. We still see that as like a good deck. It's powerful. The issue is that, especially as you're going up to more competitive stuff, is that like Teferi, even if they got Auspicious Strix and don't hit anything amazing, just lands, they just bounce the creature and you have to rebuild. That's the biggest issue with Mutate in general, is that there's a little bit more value than just like playing Auras type of thing. Like how Auras is always like a 2-for-1 almost. If they do kill a creature, dead. But Mutate gets a little bit more value, but it's just inconsistent in the value that it gives. And that's the biggest issue. It's just like I think that there's plenty of games that will beat Bant Ramp, but there's also going to be probably a little bit more games, more consistently Bant is going to be beating the Mutate deck, and that's just the issue.
The only way that Bant or the Mutate will beat Bant is you have to ignore the Boreal Grazer, have to put it on your Paradise Druid so it has hexproof. You need them to whiff on their Shatter the Sky, and then you have to get a Migratory Greathorn for the ramp into a Sterix after that. And there's only 4 Sterixes in the whole deck, so the consistency of being able to do that line is not there. It's, I think, a really great tank deck. On the other hand, I made a Mutate deck with Terror of the Peaks and Fiery Emancipation, so we can flood the field with those through our Sterix. And then when all the creatures enter the battlefield, they do triple damage to their power to your opponent, right? So that's a lot of fun, but I don't think it's anything other than really fun, Jay.
All right, so let me ask y'all this question. You're in the Mythic Championship final match. Your opponent's running Bant Ramp. What deck do you hope you have? Like you know their whole 75 card list, and they say, "Hey, Jeff, hey, HGG, run out to the side, get whatever deck you want, come back and play." Do you go back? Do you go get your own Bant Ramp, or what do you go get?
Yeah, you get Bant Ramp.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it actually works pretty well in the mirror match as well. That's part of the reason it's so good, is that if you're up against the same exact deck, you probably want to be playing the same exact stuff, because it's you're running up against the same good thing, but there is the chance that you get ahead of the game, that you get to Shark Typhoon earlier, you start hitting your ECBs before they do. There's a lot of good potential, but I can't think of any other deck I'd want to be playing more than this. Potentially, the sacrifice decks, potentially. That's probably my next go-to, and then I could see if a really fine-tuned mono red deck might be able to get underneath them, but that's only if you win the die roll, and you were playing first on the first game and the third game. You're probably going to lose the second one, but like if you are on the play, you can win on turn 4 if you at least get them low enough, and then maybe if they kind of dawdle a little bit, you can kill them turn 5, turn 6. So I think mono red is still in the runnings for it. The issue is that it's going to be inconsistent, because I think that mono red loses the games when you're not on the play in best of 3 even. And so, but I don't know. There's a few cards that mono red has gotten that we still haven't seen like worked into the mix just yet. There is the new Sabrina card that I think is powerful. That's probably the only one that it really got. Like mono red didn't get a lot of love in this set. Like there's some like big red stuff, but like that's not good enough against Bant Ramp. It's not good enough to be competitive. It's really fun and it's cool for like maybe Cavalcade of Calamity style stuff. Which that's another thing to throw out. What about Cavalcade of Calamity? Because those decks can be fast enough sometimes. Is that actually a chance?
Gemraiser just eats it, right? Gemraiser is such a high value creature right now for mono green. It shuts down so many different decks. Like, I absolutely love it.
And Teferi does
Cavalcade
bounce
deck.
Cavalcade as well. Yeah.
All right, so let me ask y'all this. Are there any decks in the meta that are affecting a deck that could be good against Bant Ramp, but because of the rest of the meta, it's not ever going to see play? Like you were saying, not auspicious, Gem Razor shuts down like Mono Red, right? Because it destroys the Cavalcade. Well, if that was to not be there, do you think Mono Red would have an actual chance? Or do you think it's still just like too inconsistent?
I think so. I think that it has a chance of coming into play a little bit. We'll see. The issue with Cavalcade is like, if you don't have Cavalcade, what are you doing? You're just hitting for 1/1, that type of thing. That's where the normal mono red was typically played over the Cavalcade deck, is that you just had a bit more consistency in that kind of game plan, whatever. And so again, that's the issue with Cavalcade of Calamity. It's not quite good enough for it. Mono red though, I think still does see play in competitive scenes. I think because it's going to be better against the decks that are trying to beat this deck. So like, so there is this Bant Ramp deck that people are going to be playing. I think people will be playing variations. I think Azorius Control is still going to be out there for sure, because Azorius Control tends to do well against these types of decks where they just go more in on the just counter your stuff, control everything you're trying to do, don't let you get value, and then win with something you can't deal with, like type of thing. I think that those decks will be pretty powerful. Mono red typically beats those decks though, like the Azorius Control type thing, where it's a little bit slower. It doesn't quite have the answers, or they're having to have so many answers in the main board to be able to beat Bant that Mono red will get game 1, and then it's like a 50-50 chance on game 2, game 3. And so
I think we're in a similar situation where it's a lottery or we're gambling, where we have to curve into Annex, turn 1 drop, turn 2 drop, turn 3 on Annex. Now, if he doesn't wipe, we can cleave on turn 4. If he does wipe, now we have a Torbran on turn 4, and then our Satyrs can hit for lethal. I think that's really the only way that equation is balanceable. Anyways, I wanted to talk about Simic, you guys. Simic Flash, a couple new additions. We have Rewind, which is just an amazing counter target spell. Tap up to 4 lands. We also have Baron, Tolarian Archmage, the new Human Wizard, Legendary 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, return up to 1 other target creature or planeswalker to its owner's hand, and at the beginning of your end step, permanent was put into your hand from the battlefield this way and draw a card. So we also have Lofty Denial, I suppose, another instant for 2, counter target spell unless its controller pays 1. A creature with flying, counter that spell unless its controller pays 4 instead.
Yeah, which they have Spectral Sailor, they have Brazen Borrower to help kind of make sure that it's still flying. And honestly, even just making them pay 1 every once in a while. Oh, and Shark Typhoon. Even just making them pay 1 sometimes will still get you there for the counter spell. So yeah, that's an interesting one to add as an addition.
So like if we break it down against Bant Ramp, we let them ramp because we can't deal with their ramp. We need to hold our counter spells for like required high target value, right? Can we win if we can just counter their high value? Like if we can stop their Ugin, if we can somehow keep Uro off the field, right? I'm imagining being able to get your Night Pack out before it, and then you just always have chump blockers. I guess the question is, can you make them mill themselves?
Yeah,
I don't know.
My problem. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the way that you win with this is tempo. You tempo them out. You keep getting in for 3, for 5, whatever, that kind of thing. And even though they're gaining life with Uros, everything like that, you're still going to be getting in because you got your Brazen Borrower out. You're holding up counter spells. They can't play anything that really matters. Or if they do, you have another Brazen Borrower. Like whatever. That's how this deck wins. Is just kind of just sticking good value. And then being able to hold up all of the ability to kind of answer everything else that they're going to be playing. So yeah, it's really powerful. It's a really good deck. I think that honestly, tempo might be a way that you can actually beat Bant. Again, though, I'm not sure if it's going to be consistent enough, because what if they do just get to, like what if they do stick something? What if you don't have the right cards in hand? Then what?
Well, yeah, 3 mana Tef is like the biggest thing that pops out against Simic Flash,
Yeah.
obviously, because it's like, well, your Flash deck is non-existent.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
But is there a 1 to 2 mana thing that we could put down before Tef that Tef isn't going to immediately bounce and make us regret in Simic Flash? And I find it like you're kind of on the not on the same level of mono red where you need to get lucky, but you do need to. I feel like if you get down 2 creatures, turn 1 Spectral Sailor, turn 2 Brightborn, I feel like Simic's chances of beating the Bant deck go way up, because then their turn 3 Teferi or their turn 4 Teferi, it still dies. So I think the whole matchup is dependent on that 3 mana Planeswalker that you're going to either spend all match trying to remove it, or they're going to spend all match trying to loot themselves into it.
Or you plan on being able to counter it. So that's the whole reason for the Lofty Denials and the Mystical Disputes, where you like those are really good game plans for countering Teferi, where Lofty Denial, even if you don't have a flyer on the battlefield with Spectral Sailor or whatever, 2 mana, if they are spending the 3 mana they have to be able to play it, they're not going to be able to counter or to pay for the Lofty Denial attacks. So that's kind of the game plan. That's how it's always been with Simic Flash, is that counter Teferi, game plan number 1. Everything like that. The issue that they keep running into, though, is that by having that as such an important game plan to their deck, being able to counter Teferi, they're not able to have the cards that are necessary to beat mono red, to beat the more aggro type of decks, to beat those kinds of things. And so, as we see in the meta like this, where you're just playing on MTG Arena, you're going to be running up against a bunch of different types of decks. I think that we see Simic Flash maybe come into play more in like a competitive scene, because I feel like if everyone's being Bant Ramp, like you were saying, is there a deck that I probably want to play more against it? If I was wanting to play anything, it would probably be something like this, actually. Like I think that maybe cut out the 2 Brightborn Cutthroats for more Field Mystics, just like have a ton of counter magic that actually gets damage in as well. The one issue, though, is that how do you counter Jolrael? Like, honestly, I that was the one card I was kind of surprised to see in the Bant Ramp that just makes so much sense now. Jolrael, 2 mana, comes out. Every time you draw 2 cards in a turn, you're getting another 2/2. That's something that Bant Ramp or the Simic Flash deck actually will have a lot of issues with. And so I think that you just side in a few more copies of that. You try to get a few more cards down. Yeah, it's still not going to be a consistent win condition, because you're not going to have it every single time. But Bant Ramp does have a legitimate answer against like the Simic Flash deck as well in Jolrael. But I think if any deck probably has a bigger chance, it's probably Simic Flash. What do you guys think?
See, I'm curious, and HG, you probably know a bit more on this than me. Which deck wins in the late game? I'm thinking it's Bant Ramp, yeah, because they have the Euro and the Nissa, and they have access. No, you're saying Simic Flash wins in the late game?
So I wanted to say that Shark Typhoon also eats Teferi. So like I'm not so scared of Teferi because we have Lofty Denial, our Mystical Disputes, and Shark Typhoons, all which can easily deal with Teferi. And then you mentioned late game. Nightpack Ambusher can just get so out of hand for them. And then you still have the ability to have that counter magic. So when they do try to Ugin minus X you, no, right? Try again. And then your field is just going out of control. So I think if you can get underneath of them and have the mana and the counters, only counter the specific important things, which may, like you say, come into play later game, probably not the early game ramp, and then just try to execute your own plan by getting that Nightpack Ambusher out, something like this. Even the Brazen Borrowers, for the chip damage there is really nice.
Well, see,
While maintaining your counterspell. Sorry.
No, you're fine. I'd rather you like finish your point than interrupt. That's rude. But the nice thing about Bant, and the reason I was like, well, it might win later, is Simic. You're hoping that you get your wolf down, and you're hoping that it builds. But the Bant player also has their Jolariel to sort of chum block, like 1-on-1 with your wolf, right? But Bant also has Shatter to the Sky, so when shit gets too hairy, they're just like, all right, let's reset. And what does Simic Flash do in response to be like, okay, I'm gonna rebuild my cards? Are they going back for the Shark Typhoon? Because again, you have like Dovin's Veto, to where sure you can try a counter war, but ultimately you'll always lose that war to Veto, right? So it feels to me like Bant Ramp is the big brother to Simic Flash. Like everything Simic Flash tries to do, Bant Ramp is like, oh, that's cute, but I'm gonna show you how it's really done. You just sit down for a second.
To an extent, again, it all comes down to how many turns Brazen Borrower can stay on the battlefield before they have the answer. That kind of thing. Because it's all about Brazen Borrower or a couple of them or Nightpack Hamster. If it gets in for X number of hits, the game's over before Bant Ramp can actually do its thing. Simic has the complete ability to do that. And that's the main reason I feel like that there's a chance for Simic Ramp. Even if it's the Shark Typhoons can come out not uncounterably to block stuff. Well, you have Brazen Borrowers to be able to bounce those. Like you have the answers for a lot of what Bant Ramp's doing. Like you said though, the late game, I think that Bant Ramp does have a higher percentage chance in the late game, but like the late game, I would say that Simic should be in the lead until about turn 6 or 7. And then it's just a matter if they can close out the game quick enough. I'm not sure if they can consistently close out quick enough, because if Bant hits into Uro enough times, just gaining enough life, that if they gain 6 life off of Uro, that's a lot longer. That's a lot more turns that they have to be able to get in for chip damage. If they gain 9 or 12 points of damage off after bringing back an Uro or whatever else, and you're not countering it, you're in the same issue. And if you're having to counter the Growth Spiral, the Uro, and a Teferi at the same time, like it makes it a really difficult to have enough stuff in hand for this type of deck. And that's what we've seen in the past, like with more like the mono blue tempo deck that was around way back before, is that it was consistently drawing cards. That's something that is actually a little bit of an issue with this deck, is that there's not a lot of card draw to keep the hand full of answers. Growth Spiral is one of the card draw. Spectral Sailor to be able to hold up mana draw. Baron is kind of coming in for the slot for draw. Like that's really not that much draw, not nearly close to the amount of value that the Bant Ramp can kind of keep up with. So yeah, I think that this one will have a percentage chance to be winning against Bant, but not if they get past like turn 7, turn 8. Is my thoughts.
I like Baron's bounce on the Brazen Borrower to give you access to Petty Theft. I think that's really cool, as well as bouncing back a Furled Mystic. I think those are probably really your only viable targets there, in all honesty.
Yeah. And then you don't really have the ability to bounce Baron back, so you only get it one time, kind of, with that too.
All right.
But it's good.
Let me ask y'all this then. Again, Mythic Championship, but they're telling you sit down on one side of the table, one Simic Flash, one's Bant Ramp. Which side you sitting down on?
Bant Ramp.
Bant Ramp?
I don't know. I actually think that Simic could have a shot still. I don't.
I think it will beat it. But what do the percentage rates come down? What's the consistency like?
Well,
I think if any deck can.
Well, there's another card too that we haven't really talked about with Bant Ramp, is Hydrocrisis. Another one where it's like another, because like what we're saying, Bant Ramp is probably going to build a ramp. They're probably going to be able to get a bunch of mana onto the battlefield. And then they can either throw it into like a massive Shark Typhoon, but like Hydrocrisis is another mana sink that works really well, where it gains them life, draws them cards, and all of a sudden they're back in the lead. So it's kind of funny. There's a lot of like even 2-ofs. So the version I'm looking at right here has 2 Scavenge Jews, 2 Joriel, 2 Hydrocrisis, and then like a 4 of all the other good stuff we've been talking about. But those 2-ofs, each one of them kind of answer a lot of those decks that are just kind of out there, and then it's just doing all the game plan that's nearly impossible to beat besides it. But Hydrocrisis actually, I think, comes in as maybe the answer for the Simic, because even if they counter Hydrocrisis, you're gaining life and you're drawing cards, and it's going to again take them one extra turn to deal with it. I think that Simic wins if they keep a wolf on the battlefield for a long time, but that's even going to be difficult to do. So I don't know. It's a really interesting deck.
I think at the end of the day, what flavoring of Ugin is important. So it's like, do you want to run Casualties of War, or do you want to run ECD? I think if another deck does have a chance to kind of consistently take it down, it's just going to be Sultai Ramp instead, right?
Yeah.
You're going to just exchange the whites or ECD and Teferi for Casualties of War, right? So.
But then
I like that deck.
But then this deck has a lot of issues against Azorius control, not having Teferi to run up against it. And so, yeah. So but yeah, does this beat Bant Ramp? That's what you were talking about.
You can, I think. Just eating their land. If you can get the play, be ahead of them, and then just you're taking out their lands, Planeswalker. I just have so much faith in ramping into Casualties of War. I love it.
Yeah, I think chopping them, so to speak, halfway through the game is probably the best way to knock out Bant Ramp, because you're not just destroying the land and a creature, you're also taking out a planeswalker. Like, and that's the thing with Bant Ramp is they use planeswalkers and creatures and like everything, enchantments. So I think that's actually a really good point. And maybe we just haven't seen anyone smart / brave enough to take Sultai Ramp and like, hey, sit down, Bant.
Yeah, I think that it's, again, there's a very different feel for you're playing up against every random deck that will be out there versus you were coming to a competitive scene where you know Bant Ramp is going to be there mostly. Where like a lot of like the Sultai ramp decks that I'm seeing like have a lot more answers for creatures, a lot more answers for just like different small things here and there. I can see like duress coming in, like being able to have the black mana to be able to just duress them, be able to like disrupt the flow of gameplay that they have at the early game. Because that's another way, instead of just countering their spell on turn 3, getting it out of their hand on turn 1, maybe just playing a little bit more of, like thought erasures, duress, all that kind of stuff, getting cards out of the hand, and then still ramping up to Ugin, that kind of stuff. Because I do think still whoever hits, that's actually an issue. Whoever hits it first Ugin typically is going to be winning, but against Bant Ramp, like they actually can win through Ugin. They just throw down ECD and you're fine. Like I guess the same thing though here with this. Casualties of War can just come down and kill whatever else and be good too. So yeah, that's another good deck that could definitely see play for sure.
Yeah.
I like Agonizing Remorse in the matchup against Bant Ramp, right? Because we can take their Ugin, or not their Ugin. Well, I guess we could take their Ugin, but we could take their Uro right away, just so he's like it takes that ramp right away from him. So he might have a growth spiral, but then he's really counting on that Uro to keep him going, right? So I think if at any point you can kind of cut the legs out from underneath of them while they're trying to ramp, that's a really good strategy, kind of opposite to the Simic Flash strategy where you're trying to save your counters for the more important things and just kind of leave the ramp alone. Whereas in Sultai, I think if you can just take the legs out from underneath of them while they're trying to stand, and then just allows you to stand up, and then they'll never really reach you, right? Mm-hmm. Like you said, Duress is really good, Agonizing Remorse, Thought Erasure. Even, I know this is salty, but a Timeo, Collector of Tales, to re-grab Casualties of War from your graveyard. Oh, yeah, I love it.
Tameo is still a busted card. It works so well with Uro as well.
I think Sultai is better at answering things in the meta actually, because you have the Cryocanarium and you have Tameo, which can't discard or sacrifice. Am I wrong on that? Yeah. It feels like Sultai actually should be better against the field than Bant, and that kind of makes me curious as to why we're not seeing Sultai. Do you have a good answer for that? Like why is Sultai not as prevalent as Bant? Is it just the 3-mana Teft that people have been brainwashed into thinking they need? Yeah.
That's what I was going to say, is that it has 3 mana Teferi. That really is a big deal. I think that also it could be a little bit more fine-tuned. It's 3 mana Teferi and it's Elspeth Conquers Death. Those are 2 amazing cards that are not in. If you go out of white, you don't have them. Does black add extra value to it? I'm trying to think of like what it really could bring. There is more removal. There's going to, like we're talking about, disruption and interaction, definitely there in black, but not at the same value level that Teferi and Elspeth Conquers Death, I think, provide. Where
one thing is kind of
stuff, draw cards, shut down all counter spells. That's just Teferi. Elspeth Conquers Death, kill something that's important.
I think what we're not seeing enough
their
of,
game plan on the next turn, and bring something back from the graveyard. There's just so much value.
I think we're not seeing enough of things like Elspeth's Nightmare, though, right? Because that card deals with Jolariel, hits their hand, and hits their graveyard, right? 3 mana, like hits everything that you want to hit in a Bant deck.
Except it's turn 3. That's the biggest issue, is that it's a turn too late. I think that's what we saw every time with Elspeth.
But in
Elspeth's
Sultai, you can have
Nightmare,
the
I think
goose
it was
on
called.
turn 1 and turn 2 this, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And
If
Grazer
you do
turn
ramp
1.
into it,
Yeah.
but then
You can also
you're going to
ramp.
want to wait for it until you have a target. So if they never play the Joriel, are you
That's
actually going to
true.
be playing Elspeth's Nightmare just for
That's-
the discard?
That's
I'd much
great.
rather be playing the Duress or something like that instead. It's hard though. It's hard to say.
We have Eliminate that deals with Joriel at instant speed. And I also really like the fact that we're not only ramping into the Spirit Dragon, but we're also ramping into the Ineffable, right? So we could, and then the Ineffable lowers our colorless cast, which is the Spirit Dragon as well. So I like the combination of having both Ugins. Now I know that both decks do have access to that, but it seems like the Bant Ramp isn't really running Ugin the Ineffable. It's just a little bit more of early game spot removal on permanence. Because like say they do have the ECD, Ugin easily can minus on their ECD potentially, because also they don't have a huge board presence. If Joriel's not there, I think that we can get away with having a Planeswalker maybe at 1 loyalty, at 2 loyalty, because we're not going to be seeing any creatures with haste, no spell damage, right? I mean, maybe other than an Ugin plus, but I really like the addition of the second Ugin. Maybe within both of these decks, but especially the Sultai version.
Yeah. All right. So here's my question: does the Bant Ramp, because it's so powerful, because I'm like, even all these different things that we're bringing in, it's like, okay, you have to almost forget the rest of the meta sometimes to be able to beat the Bant Ramp deck. But Bant Ramp doesn't have to do that. It's just powerful, like, because it curves out really, really well. Like it's able to deal with almost every deck in the meta, as we've been talking about, while still just being powerful. And yeah, it's going to lose games. That's just that's magic, like, but it's going to have a really high win percentage. Because of that, do you see the ban hammer coming down for any of these cards? Like just kind of projections, predictable. Do you think that could cause any bans to be coming out?
I don't see any one card in Bant that's like, this is why Bant Ramp is so strong. It's the collective of all of it, right? So like if you look at banning a card, maybe 3 mana Tef, but people have been saying we should ban that for like a year now, right? So it's a little late on that.
Which I don't know why they haven't yet, honestly. But
Yeah.
but
like
if they haven't yet, they probably won't.
Yeah, realistically, I don't know that Core Set 2021, at least so far, I haven't seen any like, this is a bannable card. Now that's not to say that Teferi Master of Time won't get some crazy combo in the future. I mean, it's Teferi, but right now it's not one piece like with the Luca decks where it was like, okay, everyone's just hitting Agent of Treachery because you can hit it and then bounce it or whatever. Like you're just taking all your opponent's stuff. This is a bit harder to target, to mix up the meta, because if you take out Euro, like, you're affecting a lot more than just Bant Ramp. You're affecting all of Ramp. You're affecting Sultai. So I don't know.
I don't think so. I think every deck can easily enough sideboard in, or not even sideboard, just incorporate colorless cards into their build so that Ugin doesn't completely devastate their whole field presence, so they can still have a couple pieces survive, right? And get the kill in on Ugin potentially. I don't think anything's bannable. I mean, it's not enough. Like, it's great, and
I might disagree a little bit. So I actually think that if anything does finally get Teferi banned, so we saw this with in Kaladesh. So the Teamer energy deck kept being good over and over and over again, and they kept getting new sets, and they kind of like didn't ban anything, didn't answer anything for quite a while. And then they finally were like, okay, we're going to cut out the 2 early game pieces that turned the deck on, and all of a sudden the deck was dead. Like that did finally happen. I think the same type of thing here is potential with Teferi. The biggest issue with it is that we're going to see competitions or whatever, that kind of stuff, where the only deck that people are going to be playing is Bant. Like it's going to be Bant Ramp or Azorius Control, which will also be playing Teferi. And when Wizards finally typically address this stuff is when they see that the exact same card is being played over and over and over again. So far, we've not had that happen because while Teferi is really, really good and it shuts down a lot of different archetypes, it also made a lot of other archetypes be playable. The thing I'm worried about with Bant Ramp is that it's finally a good enough deck because there's so many sets available, so much stuff, that they have all the perfect cards for each slot, to be able to shut down most other archetypes, where I think that people will only be playing this. And so that is the issue, and that's where the ban will tend to happen. So anyway, that is my prediction, is if we don't see at least 2 other decks come in to be able to compete against this consistently, then we'll start seeing a ban hammer come down for something in this. And my guess is that it's Teferi Time Raveler, the 3-mana Teferi. Because I think that if just taking that out, yeah, the rest of the deck is still really, really powerful, but that means that control can answer them. That means that Flash all of a sudden is a lot higher up on that thing. If they don't have to immediately answer Teferi Time Raveler on their turn 2, they can start building around other stuff. This lets in mono red. Also, they have access to Embercleave more consistently. There's so that's the biggest thing for me, is I do think that Teferi Time Raveler, 3-mana Teferi, having that gone from the meta. Again, I'm not saying that they do it. I'm saying if it comes to a scenario where it's the most played card in every single thing, there's nothing but Bant played, then we're going to see Teferi Time Raveler potentially banned, and that will lead it forward. Will they do it on the last 3 months before rotation, before it goes out of the format anyway? I don't know. Again, it comes down to what competitions are going on, what kind of stuff are we seeing, and how much backfire. Because they did do that exact same thing with Kaladesh. They banned it literally 3 months before it was out of rotation anyway. So we've seen it happen in the past. I hope that they address it if it gets to that point, is what I'm trying to say. I'm fine with the 3-mana Teferi for the most part, except that I think that it really reduces the variety in competitive gameplay, especially this set.
Yeah. All right. So closing thoughts on the meta, Jeff. You gave yours on the ban and all that. HCG, what do you think about bans, about the meta, Ugin, Tef? Let it rip.
I don't think we'll see any bans this set until after fall rotation, personally. In my head, it comes back to I hate Uro. And then it comes full circle to how much I love Narset, and then I sit on that for a second, and then I think about how much I hate Narset. So I think the meta's in a really fun spot right now. We did only talk about a few of the prevalent decks, but the list goes on quite a bit. There's a lot more decks that we didn't touch on and break down. I think it's very versatile. I don't think that the power level is as versatile. Like, obviously we're sitting on Bant Ramp as a tier 1 deck, and then it's like almost everything else is a tier 2 and lower. But just the number of semi-competitive decks, like those tier 2 and the tier 1.5s that we have access to, it's just really diverse, and I love being able to pick up a new deck that's still going to be competitive rather than just playing the same deck every day. I don't think any bans. I think we are in a really good position meta-wise. We're really early on in the meta. I think that maybe the power level will get toned down a little bit as people kind of learn to deal with these archetypes a little bit more efficiently. Just right now, it's an arms race. People are ramping into Ugin. It is very, very destructive.
Yeah, I actually like that analogy. It's an arms race. Personally, I don't see them banning Teferi either, but only because I think they're a little afraid of what happens after they ban a card, right? I think that's one of the Wizards' main concerns with banning cards, is like they have this image of what the sets as a whole are going to be like when they're putting out the sets. And I'm sure Teferi was one of those cards that were like, hey, this is going to be a staple, and we'll probably need to keep an eye on it because it may need to get to that bannable spot. But at the same time, I think they were thinking about it when they did Simic Flash. Because if you take out Teferi, then you just have this blue-green player, and we've talked about this before, where on Arena, you don't want that slow, grudging gameplay. You want something fast and exciting. Tef kind of allows that, because if you take out all the flash, all the instant speed, all the counter magic, which is what Tef does, then you allow for ramp. You allow for that play on your turn and it not just being countered immediately. So I think as much as a lot of people are like, oh, Tef bans fun, Tef does this, I think Wizards are sitting back like, no, y'all are happy that you have Tef, you just don't know it. That's my personal take on the whole ban thing, but we all could be way far off, and they could just be messing with us, and they're like, yeah, whatever, just throwing stuff at the wall.
No, I think there was a post on Twitter that was kind of like Wizards finally said like, hey, you guys didn't like just straight up counter magic. here's Teferi, so you don't have it all the time. Yeah, so I mean, there definitely is that. I think that the one side though is that taking out instant speed play takes out an entire gameplay of Magic in general. You know, but at the same time, only 3 more months. We'll see.
All right, folks. Well, Jeff, are you good to end it? I'm figuring when he gets back, I'll do the closing.
I'm good.
All right. HG, yeah, we're just gonna do the close out here. It's been an hour, and I'm trying to get some rest and all that good stuff. I know y'all are. All right, thanks everybody for joining us on the FNM podcast week 4. We talked a lot about Bant Ramp. We talked a lot about the other options and how they can potentially beat Bant Ramp. So hopefully you feel a little bit better equipped when going out into the competitive field, this weekend or next week, and can actually go up against Bant Ramp. Or maybe we just converted you into a Bant Ramp player and we're regretting it now.
Sorry, everyone.
Have fun.
All right, peace.
Take care.